He came with a smile and a camera. He said he was here to tell Africa's story. But what nobody knew was that he wasn't filming a documentary. He was mapping secrets. He wasn't hunting truth. He was hunting targets. It started quietly. A man with fair skin, clean shoes, and a French accent landed at Ouagadougou International Airport with a tourist visa and a press badge clipped to his shirt. He told customs officials he was a freelance journalist, here to understand Burkina Faso's security challenges and share local voices with the world. He smiled, spoke in fluent French, and said he admired President Ibrahim Traore's courage. "It's rare to see young African leaders who stand up to the West," he said. People believed him. Why wouldn't they? He acted polite. He offered water to taxi drivers. He handed out pens to school kids. He bought tea in village markets and took pictures of sunsets and goats. But behind the lens of his camera, he was filming something else. Over the next few weeks, the journalist visited places most reporters didn't go. He stayed near military camps, walked near rail lines, and asked local guards about transport routes and mine shipments. When one soldier joked, "You ask more questions than our own commander," the man laughed and replied, "That's how journalists learn." At night, he stayed in a guest house on the edge of the city. Nobody ever saw him drink or party. But they noticed something strange. He made international calls every night, never using local SIM cards. He didn't post his stories online. He didn't tag anyone. He claimed everything would be released in a special European report. And yet, there were no articles, no bylines, no reports published in France. At first, locals thought he was just eccentric. But one night, when he was seen near a restricted radio tower, things changed. Burkinabe intelligence began to watch quietly. They followed his movements. They cloned his SIM without touching his phone. They logged his emails, texts, and voice messages. What they found was not journalism. It was espionage. And when President Traore saw the evidence himself, he didn't call for a raid. He did something smarter. He invited the spy to ask his questions directly, on camera, in front of the nation. News cameras rolled quietly as the chairs were set. A small press conference had been announced in Ouagadougou, hosted by the Office of the Presidency. But unlike usual, there were no press kits, no printed questions, no reporters from CNN, BBC, or RFI, just a few hand-picked local journalists. And one name added to the guest list, at the very last minute. Mr. Julien Morel, freelance journalist, France. He arrived alone, dressed in beige trousers, a white shirt, and the same press badge he'd shown at the airport weeks earlier. No tripod, no cameraman, just his shoulder bag, notebook, and a slight smirk on his face. He had no idea what was coming. As he entered the compound, he greeted guards like he belonged there. "I'm here for the president's press briefing," he said confidently. A soldier nodded and pointed him forward. But behind the uniform, the soldier's eyes were watching closely. Inside, the room was quiet. Maybe too quiet. Cameras were already rolling. A microphone stood at the center. There were only 6 chairs for journalists, lined in a half circle. Julien sat down casually, opened his notebook, and looked around. No one smiled at him. No one greeted him. It felt cold. But he brushed it off. He thought it was normal. Maybe they were nervous around a European journalist. Then the door opened, and President Ibrahim Traore stepped in, calm, straight-backed, dressed not in a suit, but in his military fatigues. He didn't look tired. He didn't look rushed. He looked ready. Julien stood up and extended his hand. "Mr. President, it's an honor. I was hoping—" Traore shook his hand, firmly, and replied, "You've been asking many questions about us, Monsieur Morel. Today, I will answer them. But first, I have a few of my own." Julien blinked. Was this a trap? He smiled nervously, pretending to be relaxed. Of course. That's what interviews are for. But this wasn't going to be a normal interview. Because Ibrahim Traore hadn't invited a journalist. He had invited a spy. And the next few minutes would reveal just how deep the betrayal went. The questions begin. The camera's red light blinked softly. 6 journalists sat in silence, notebooks open, hands still. In the middle stood President Ibrahim Traore, calm, composed, and holding no papers. Across from him, Julien Morel adjusted his collar. He was used to being in control of interviews, but this time something felt different. Traore wasn't smiling. He wasn't introducing policies or reading statements. He was studying him. "Monsieur Morel," Traore began, "you've been in our country for 23 days, correct?" "Yes, Mr. President," Julien replied, steadying his voice. "I've been gathering stories, filming locals, trying to understand—" "Understand what?" Julien hesitated. The challenges your people face. Security, infrastructure, foreign relations." Traore nodded slowly, then turned to the side. A soldier stepped forward, holding a sealed folder. "You have visited 9 military-adjacent zones," Traore continued. "You have recorded 3 strategic locations, disguised as interviews with guards." Julien blinked. The room got colder. I'm a journalist," he said. "That's what we do. We go where the stories are." Traore stepped closer. "And is it also normal for journalists to send encrypted emails at 2 a.m. to servers registered in Abidjan?" Julien froze. One of the other journalists turned her head, shocked. The soldier opened the folder and held up a photo. Julien at night. Laptop open. Encrypted mail client on screen. Then another. Julien standing outside a military radio tower, phone in hand. And another. Screenshots of messages sent to a man known to Burkina's intelligence. A French military contractor working under diplomatic cover in West Africa. Julien's face lost color. "I can explain. Please do," Traore said. But Julien had no words. He wasn't under pressure from questions anymore. He was under investigation. Traore looked to the cameras. "This man says he came to understand our people. But in truth, he came to record our weak points, map our movements, and send our secrets abroad. He came not to tell our story, but to write his own." And then Traore said, "Let the people decide if this is journalism or betrayal." The silence in that room was louder than thunder. Julien Morel had come to expose Africa. But now it was Africa exposing him. Julien Morel's hand trembled as he reached for his bag. The room was still silent, the cameras still rolling, but the air had changed. What started as a simple press conference had become something else. A public trial. A quiet takedown. And he was the target. "Mr. Morel," President Traore said calmly, "do you deny these photos, the messages, the recordings?" Julien opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He was sweating now, not because of the heat, but because the plan, whatever it had been, was falling apart. A second soldier walked in, carrying a black laptop. It was Julien's, confiscated the night before without him even noticing. Traore nodded. The screen was switched on. "Let us show you something," he said to the room. The projector lit up the wall. There it was, a real-time map of Burkina Faso, with pins on oil routes, mine locations, and 2 unmarked military storage depots. "Found in a folder labeled For Review, Côte d'Ivoire Client," Traore said. Gasps echoed around the room. Julien shook his head slowly. "I didn't mean... It was just notes. I didn't send... Then explain this," Traore interrupted. He raised a paper with one printed email. "Target's movements predictable. Palace security, thin near Westgate, can be monitored for future asset placement." Julien's face turned pale. "No, that's not... It's fake. It was sent from your encrypted mail at 2:17 a.m. from a guest house in Zone 3. We don't forge evidence, Monsieur Morel. We collect it." The local journalists stared in disbelief. Some whispered prayers. Others just stared at the white man in the room, who once walked with confidence, now shaking, his lies unraveling thread by thread. He had come here with a plan, but he had underestimated the country. He had underestimated its intelligence. And most of all, he had underestimated the man standing across from him. President Traore walked slowly back to the microphone. He wasn't angry. He didn't shout. He simply looked into the camera and said, "This is what they send us. Not aid, not apologies, but spies with cameras, who call themselves journalists. They think we will smile and stay quiet, but that time is over." Then he turned to Julian one last time. "You came for stories. Now you are the story." And just like that, Traore gave the order, "Escort him out." 2 guards stepped forward. Julian Morel didn't resist. He just lowered his head and walked out the way he came in. Only this time, he wasn't holding the camera. He was inside the frame. By sunset, the press room was empty, the cameras were packed, the chairs folded. But the moment that confrontation between President Ibrahim Traore and Julian Morel had already left the room. It was now everywhere. The first video clip appeared on social media just 1 hour after the event. It showed Traore asking calmly, "Do you call this journalism or betrayal?" Then came the images. The laptop screen, the military maps, the intercepted emails. And finally, the white Frenchman walking out of the room in silence, flanked by 2 guards. The internet exploded. In Burkina Faso, people gathered in cafes and homes to replay the footage over and over. One man shouted, "He caught a spy live on TV." A grandmother in a village near Kaya whispered, "We've waited a long time to see a president stand tall like this." Across West Africa, the video spread like fire. TikTok, WhatsApp, Facebook. Everywhere, people watched Traore flip the script. They came to study us, but they got studied. This is how you handle them, with facts, not fear. In Senegal, students painted a mural of Traore with the words, "Africa has eyes now." In Ghana, a viral tweet read, "He didn't raise his voice, but he raised the standard." In France, however, the reaction was different. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs released a cold statement. "We are reviewing the situation and expect fair treatment for all citizens." But they said nothing about the evidence. They said nothing about the maps, or the emails, or the connection to Abidjan. Because they couldn't. Meanwhile, inside Burkina Faso, Julian Morel was under formal arrest, not for being a journalist, but for unauthorized surveillance and national security breaches. He was moved to a secured facility outside the capital. But it wasn't just about him anymore. This was about every microphone that had been used to gather secrets, every handshake that came with a hidden condition, every photo taken with smiling faces and double meanings. President Traore didn't make another speech. He didn't need to. The world had already heard what he said in that room. "You came for stories. Now you are the story." And as the video continued to go viral, one thing became clear across Africa. This wasn't just about catching one spy. It was about standing up to all of them. The video hit the internet before the press room was even empty. It started with one clip, just 40 seconds long. President Ibrahim Traore, standing calmly in front of cameras, saying, "You came for stories. Now you are the story." And then, the guards taking Julian Morel, the so-called French journalist, out of the room in silence. No shouting, no drama, just truth. That was all it took. By evening, the video had already reached millions. On TikTok, people in Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, and Mali reposted it with captions like, "This is how you protect your country." He exposed him without touching him. Africa is awake. In Burkina Faso, shops stopped playing music. They played the press conference instead. Young people gathered in tea corners, replaying it on phones. Old men nodded silently at their radios. One woman in the market said, "They used to come with guns. Now they come with cameras." On TV, it was even bigger. National news played the clip over and over. But not just the walkout. They showed everything. The photos of Julian outside military areas, the laptop with maps of sensitive zones, the email to a contact in Abidjan titled "Palace Entry Point, Low Visibility." Nobody could deny it, not even the French government. But still, they tried. In Paris, they released a short statement. "We are following the situation and will ensure our citizen is treated fairly." But they didn't mention the evidence. They didn't deny it. They didn't even try to explain it, because they couldn't. Meanwhile, in West Africa, the feeling was different. This wasn't just about catching a spy. It was about finally seeing the trap and breaking it. Across borders, people shared the same message. Enough. Julien Morel, the man who came with a smile and a camera, was now being held in a military safe house. No interviews, no press passes, no audience. He asked to speak to a lawyer from the French embassy. But Traore gave his answer publicly. "We have a bigger case to answer, and it belongs to Africa." And just like that, the man who once came to expose others was now the one being exposed in front of the whole world. The press conference was over. Julien Morel was gone. Not out of the country, but inside a military detention site, waiting for trial. The world had watched it happen. The video had made it to every corner of the continent, but President Ibrahim Traore stayed silent. For 3 days, he didn't speak a word to the press. He didn't need to, because the evidence spoke for itself. But on the 4th day, he walked out of the palace. Not to stand behind a podium, not to speak to foreign reporters, but to address his people. The setting was simple, a school courtyard. Children sat on the floor. Farmers stood at the back, traders, drivers, students, and even soldiers. They all came. No one held a script. No one handed him notes. He stood in the sun and said, "They have been watching us for years. Not to help us, but to control what we say, what we build, what we dream. They sent one man with a camera, but it wasn't a camera. It was a weapon pointed at our future." He looked around the crowd and continued, "That man said he was a journalist. But his memory card carried more maps than interviews, more base locations than quotes, more targets than truth. He didn't come to tell our story. He came to steal it." The people stood in silence. Some nodded, some cried. And then he said something that would echo across Africa. "To the next one who tries this, the next man who comes smiling, with soft words and sharp wires hidden in his bag, don't mistake our silence for blindness. We see you now." That one line became a movement. On walls in Ouagadougou, it was painted. "We see you now." In TikTok, videos across Ghana and Nigeria, "We see you now." And in university halls from Dakar to Dar es Salaam, "We see you now." No arrests were made beyond Julien Morel. No embassies were stormed. There was no chaos. Only a quiet message, delivered with calm fire. "You taught us how to hold a camera. Now we know how to aim it back." That's how it ended. No gunfire, no shouting. Just one man caught in his own game, and a continent reminded of its power. Because this time, Africa didn't stay quiet. And this time, the spy became the story.